From the halls of Austin to the fights in D.C. that hit us at home, this is Politics with the Big Dogs.
Hello, hello, hello. This is Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs. We have an incredible show for you today. Oh my. We have the rise of predatory gambling, the casino groups in Texas that are deeply enmeshed in the political cycles. We have Destin Sensky joining us from Texas for Fiscal Responsibility. You guys all know TFR. They've been around for about 20 years, an outcropping of the gross margins tax, and now they have a following of million-plus conservative activists in Texas. We're going to interview him today. Huge news in the U.S. Senate race. Look, I was real confident Paxton was going to win regardless, but with Trump's endorsement recently, oh my goodness, it is slam dunk. In fact, so much so that Cornyn left Texas, went back to D.C., so I think that is a game over. We're also going to do an assessment of what is happening around the state, because Paxton was going to be on his own, in my very strong opinion, the first one to take out an incumbent Republican. But it happened a few days ago in Louisiana when Senator Cassidy, largely taken out by Trump, didn't even make the runoff there. And then we also watched Representative Massie in Kentucky, another Republican, be defeated by a Trump-backed Republican in that primary. So the Trump war on moderate RINOs is wrecking the establishment D.C., and it's happening in Texas as well. And then we had a really curious thing in the rise of these casino powers, which have spent what I'm now learning to be tens of millions of dollars trying to bring predatory gambling to Texas. Out of the blue, they put $500,000, I think the largest donation to the incumbent railroad commissioner, Jim Wright. I doubt many of you know who Jim Wright is or have a strong understanding of what the Railroad Commission is and does, but we'll speak to that as well. And then if we have time, we need to try to get to it. We've got to spend some time on how Trump is destroying the Washington swamp, because it is happening. A very similar event is happening here in Austin. The Austin swamp is being undercut. You guys banded together during the primary. We saw millions of dollars from Texans for Lawsuit Reform and other Democratic donors, this cabal of 8 or 10 mega donors in Texas who fund Democrats and mostly fund RINOs against real conservatives. They have just been wiped out in Texas this cycle. Hallelujah. And it's happening top to bottom. It's happening again. So we're gonna look a little more closely at what's happening there. All right, folks. So hold on. Here we go. We're going to start our show. Thank you so much for joining. This is Anthony Holm. You're listening to Politics with the Big Dogs. Make sure you're following us at politicswiththebigdogs.com. We're across social media, Spotify, Apple, all of our podcasts, all our radio shows are converted to podcasts. We have 35 or so up on YouTube. Join us. Continue the fight for freedom. Thank you so much. Here we go. We spoke about it in the intro. No doubt you've seen it. Ken Paxton received President Trump's endorsement this week. Holy smokes. Massive, massive. Like I said, he was winning. I had him up, Paxton winning by 7 if Trump did not engage. And frankly, I was prepared for Trump to potentially endorse Cornyn. He almost did. And I thought Ken would pull it out by about 2 to 3 if that happened. But with Trump endorsing Paxton, Cornyn loses probably by double digits, almost certainly. A crushing defeat to the institutional powers of moderation that were standing by 24 years of Senator Cornyn. I think he's a perfectly nice fellow, but he hasn't done anything in the Senate to materially move the movement, right? So the guys like Jeff Leach, I mean, we've spoken so much about this RINO Republican in Plano, Texas, up in Collin County, who has just done everything imaginable against conservatives. He has bought and paid for over about $2 million from TLR, the meme of TLR, what can I have for lunch? He opposed Trump on the semi-truck drivers who can't read or write English. He just got made a fool by Trump there, and he was out front on Cornyn. He was holding rallies, events with them, doing op-eds, going everywhere, and then yet again, Trump comes out and just crushes him. Similarly, less so, but similar, Carl Tepper, just this unknown state rep out of Lubbock who's a go-along, get-along. But he and interestingly, Senator Perry, also a Republican from Lubbock, were out really aggressively going after Paxton, a strong conservative, and it's curious as to how much of the House leadership and the Lubbock base have been attacking Paxton. You have a pretty senior chairman in Jeff Leach, another one in Shaheen, and then Tepper, who shares a border with the Speaker. It is striking and curious that this power base out of the House in Lubbock have been so aggressively opposed to Ken Paxton. But regardless, Trump slapped everybody down now with his endorsement, and I'm sure it's game over. So what is happening, and why are these type of activities happening? Why are the gazillionaires who usually give millions, if not tens of millions, to moderate Republicans and to Democrats finally being defeated? We're seeing strong conservative legislation move in D.C., less so, but in Texas now, over the protests of this ruling class of gazillionaires. How is that happening? And it's happening because you and I and folks like us have said no more. We're going to stand up. And Trump did it. Senator Cassidy in Louisiana didn't make his runoff. It was a three-way contested primary, and he was left behind in third place. So two other people, he's now a lame duck. I believe on Tuesday we'll find that Senator Cornyn is a lame duck. U.S. Congressman out of Kentucky, Massie, who really aggressively fought Trump, got primaried and lost there in the last few days. And there is this shocking shift. Finally, the things that you and I have been fighting for 30 years, taking power from the gazillionaires who just buy access and don't have any fallout, right? Like, there is Texans for Lawsuit Reform. We talked about them a lot of times. $30 million PAC. They tried to take out a whole bunch of conservatives. They came out publicly and said it. Mitch Little, a state representative, a conservative, we're not going to do it. They tried to take out Paxton. They funded Eva Guzman. They put her in the race 4 years ago. Millions of dollars wasted. They ran against DeRazio, Mark DeRazio, the guy who was chair of Bexar County in San Antonio Republican Party when remember when Strauss was killing all of our bills? He was the first one, as I recall, to lead the party to come out and censure Strauss. Like a big, huge deal. Well, TLR and then this other obscure group called ART, Associated Republicans in Texas. These are funded by the same 8 or 10 people, gazillionaires, just dropping $500,000 checks left and right, the same ones who are funding Democrats as well. They don't want constitutional conservatives in the legislature, and they don't want them. They want Cornyn. The same donors spent millions of dollars to try to boost up Cornyn, who I think had about $130 million spent helping Cornyn, whereas Paxton had like $8 million, and we're going to see that it's a victory by double digits, and even without Trump, it would have been a victory by 7. I'm certain of that. That's what my data was showing. So we were deep in it, and it's really nice to see finally a transition. You know, you and I and so many people like us, we had to fight these billionaires who didn't want to end sanctuary cities, didn't want voter ID in Texas. These are the fights that we have been advancing forever. The same guys that are opposing conservatives, real conservatives, who are trying to deliver things like, banning taxpayer-funded lobbying. They're funding all these moderates to try to keep their power. They're also big Abbott donors, and I'm not suggesting that Abbott's a moderate. Rather, I am suggesting something else, that these guys in part are getting away with it by spending $2 and $3 and $4 million against material conservatives, real conservatives out there, and then turn around and giving Abbott $500,000 and landing on, appointments. One of the big ones, John Now, a guy out of Houston, a gazillionaire out of Houston. There's no real recourse for him putting, $1.2 million or more into ART that try to take out all of our hard conservative state House members. They went against Little. They went against LaHood. They went against DeRazio. They went against Andy Hopper, whose wife's running for vice chair of the Republican Party. I mean, folks that are enmeshed conservatives. Oh, no, we're going to go take them out and try to replace them with moderates because they're too strong for us. They went in and defended Kitzman and Bell, who were both taken out by real conservatives, state rep, who were voting against things like banning taxpayer-funded lobbying, who are voting against, at times, at least historically, portability and education choice, against real tax reductions, just these go-along, get-along Republicans who don't want to affect any change. So you and I are having to go and fight and spend our time not advancing property tax fights, but making sure our children aren't transitioned and the schools don't get to indoctrinate, because none of these moderates will do it. And the gazillionaire cabal that is funding all of these folks want to keep it as it is. They want to maintain power. And it's the John Nows and the TLRs of Texas who are opposing all of these conservative values and these real conservatives in primaries, yet then turning around and getting cool appointments by Abbott to things like John Now's chairing the Bicentennial Commission. He might be a great chairman, but there ought to be some recourse when you're opposing conservatives like Ken Paxton the way you have with millions of dollars, and you're opposing all of these conservative state legislators who Governor Abbott then wants them to move his bills, right? Like, there's got to be some recourse by you and I to make sure that these people, Governor Abbott and Dan Patrick and others, hold these mega donors to account. They can't just try to destroy the conservative movement. And by the way, John Now is also a $50,000 donor to Democrat Menendez and more to Carol Alvarado. All right, they're spreading it around. So these guys are trying to destroy the conservative movement and our value system and our belief system, yet they're being welcomed with open arms by Governor Abbott because he's a fundraising machine and, raises $100 million, and these guys will each put $1 million in. It's nothing to them putting in $1 million. But the real problem is they turn around and put millions, plural, against real conservatives. They've been running against Paxton for years now, $8-10 million. Part of the impeachment got exposed by advancing the impeachment. Send letters to all the other rich guys. Don't give these conservatives money. Basically, we can't control them. And then they very publicly came out and said, we're going to defeat you. We're going to defeat these 10 Republicans who are some of the most conservative that you and I fought so hard in the primaries to get in there. And who are they doing it with now? The last couple years? The predatory casino guys. So I introed this a little bit. What is happening in these railroad commission seats and races? So here's the deal. We have something in Texas called a railroad commission, and there are 3 commissioners. Each is elected to a 6-year term. And I'm sure when this entity got formed way back when, they actually regulated railroads. And perhaps they do still today. I've got to say, I'm not certain. But what they're known for and what the bulk of their work is regulating oil and gas in Texas. They are really our oil and gas regulators. And there are 3 of them, and one of them is up right now, a guy named Jim Wright. I've never seen him do anything in the movement. I would have had trouble picking him out of the lineup, to be real clean. Of course, I knew Christy Craddock, who just ran for comptroller. She's also on there. And then there's another longtime member. So Beau French, a conservative activist out of Tarrant County, was a Tarrant County chairman for a long time, challenged Jim Wright, in the primary. When Beau French is wanting to make sure that Texas doesn't get Islamified, right? And Beau French is out there calling out big social issues. And these John Nows and TLR gazillion donors, they don't want us talking about social issues. They don't want us moving social issues. They want to make sure they control the same thing happening day in and day out in Texas so they can continue to make gazillions of dollars and fund Democrats like Menendez and Carol Alvarado as well to ensure that everything just stays in their comfort zone. So now these guys are out endorsing against and funding against Beau French, against Jim Wright. But what's shocking and curious to me is that the casino interests, and there is this movement in Texas, right? They're trying to bring big casinos, corporate casinos, the ones that you have in China, Macau-style casinos here. And you'll hear on this show, we have in the past, you'll hear again, the $3.5 million they spent trying to elect a pro-casino Texas state senator. Well, now the casinos have gotten into this Beau French fight. They've done $500,000 to Railroad Commissioner Wright, the incumbent, who Beau French, the conservative, is trying to take out. Why are the casinos getting involved in a fight for an oil and gas regulatory spot? The only thing I can extract out of it, probably two possibilities. I don't know if any are accurate. Number one, they're afraid that Beau French, an outspoken conservative, is going to speak against casinos in Texas. And number two, they might be trying to curry favor with Governor Abbott. So Governor Abbott, as I recall, it's hard to pin him down a yes or a no, but some years ago he was generally open, if not favorable, to a corporate casino, a predatory-style casino. And that language, predatory, is deliberate, because if you and I have a card game at our house, that's different than government, the state of Texas, engaging with a casino, a gambling operation, and having a predatory casino, because the house always wins. In this instance, the government and the house would just be more takings from us. So either they're trying to curry favor, my best guess, curry favor with the governor and bring him back into the going from, well, I'm open to it, I don't know, conservatives seem to be rallying against it, maybe not, let's wait and see, to more of a, yeah, I'm open to it, let's put it on the ballot and see if Texans want it, right? That's the Republicans. The moderate Republican position is, well, let the people vote, because you have to amend the Constitution to allow gambling, and that's their out. I'm not for it, but let the people vote. That is probably what's happening here, but why $500,000, and by now perhaps more, would flow from the casino guys to Railroad Commissioner Wright and against conservative Beau French is very telling. And it's the same profile of people and the same little cabal of gazillionaire donors who are trying to take out Andy Hopper, a really conservative member, state rep from North Texas, who you and I fought so hard to get in there and to fund. And conservatives funded him, and look what he did on the floor of the Texas Senate. He said, I'm never going to support gambling. So now they pushed a whole bunch of money in there. And then so did John Now and the other TLR donors and the ART PAC guys, the vestige from 50 years ago, who like, hey, you can't talk about protecting children, making sure they don't transition. You can't talk about bathrooms. You've got to just be quiet and work with all the Democrats and make sure there's a whole bunch of Democrats in there. And we're going to just keep, building companies here to pull your electricity. And yes, companies are good. They bring employment and everything else, but they've got to pay their fair share. They've got to engage, and they've got to not work to block the same conservative values that have made Texas a wonderful place to live relative to all the other states. So many people are moving here and come here for freedom and opportunity, and these guys, they want to stop that. There has been this big movement of conservative values and conservative thought shaping the role of government. But this guy, John Now, and the TLR donors are doing everything in their power to contest that. Showed me recently that the president of TLR, for example, was a donor to the Lincoln Project, the anti-Trump, 4-figure donation. We hate Trump. We want former Governor Rick Perry to do a bunch of our bidding. We don't want all these conservatives. We're going to go primary them. We've got $35 million. So they're the same swamp cabal that Trump is rooting out in D.C. that spent $130 million trying to reelect Senator Cornyn to get 30 years instead of the 24 if he loses on Tuesday. A same type of cabal happens in Texas. It's these Houston and Dallas-based old money guys who fund Ds, fund moderate Rs, and heavily fund against real conservatives, are now getting involved in railroad commission races. They're working side by side with the predatory casino interests, and it's just stunning that you and I are now having to go out there and spend our time and energy fighting this predatory corporate casinos to ensure that we have safety and protection in our state against these guys, against these gazillionaires, when it's hard enough just to get these Republicans, our Republican members, to lower our property taxes, to ban taxpayer-funded lobbying, right? The bread and butter. But we're having to get distracted on this. We've talked a lot about the transitioning of children on this show. We had to get distracted on that, not because it wasn't a noble fight, but because it should have already been outlawed. So these all work together. What happened with Trump and all the moderate money guys just being so frustrated, but Paxton was going to win anyway. They've not been able to defeat him. That same stuff is happening here in Texas, and the Paxton-Cornyn race was a good example of that. The same 8-10 mega donors, gazillionaires, who can't stand conservatives are funding the Jeff Leaches and funding against the Ken Paxtons, are funding the moderates against the Hoppers and the Drazios and the Littles and the LaHoods, real conservatives, because they're trying to stop our vision. They're trying to stop conservative values. And these same gazillionaires in Texas are funding the Democrats, right? Menendez and Carol Alvarado and other. So until Governor Abbott stops appointing them to all these little prestigious, fun things so they can go to their country clubs and say, I'm the chair of the Bicentennial Commission, and stop writing they won't stop writing $1 million checks against our interests. They just won't. And until the Beau Frenches put the Wrights out of business, and I don't know much about Jim Wright. I know Beau French. I like him. I think he'd be a very strong railroad commissioner, but I know that anybody's getting $500,000 like Wright has by the casinos, from the casinos, then I'm intuitively closer to French, just straight up. So until we can end that in Texas, I'm not sure that we're going to end this attack on our values and all these unnecessary distractions. We have just got to do better in calling out these mega donors for what they are. They're Democratic donors, and they're opposed to conservatives and opposed to conservative values. Full stop. No way around. I don't want to forget a couple others, right? These are the same gazillionaires who funded Joe Strauss. No way around it. They oppose Brent Money, Katrina Pearson, others, like very strong constitutional conservatives, 11 or 12 of them in the Texas House, who just won't bend the knee for moderate policy, just straight up. All right, we got to get on to the Texas Supreme Court, folks. So this is, again, somebody's got to do something. These same cabal of donors fund the Texas Supreme Court. So here's a bunch of Republicans elected to the Texas Supreme Court. Nobody really pays attention to who they are. Many of them were appointed initially by Abbott. And yet again, the court failed us, conservatives, and our values. So what happened in the last week? Do you remember when all the Democrats, of course you do, fled the state to stop redistricting or try to stop it? They abandoned their office, abandoned the duty. They, made a big scene for a month or maybe even a little longer. And then, of course, we passed redistricting regardless. Well, Gene Wu, a Democrat from Greater Houston area, was the leader of the Democratic caucus at that time. And he kept doing all those press conferences and thumbing his nose at Abbott and thumbing his nose at Republicans in Texas. They were hanging out with Governor Pritzker in Illinois and others, and Paxton sued him for illegal fundraising, right? So the governor, on his own, the governor and Attorney General Paxton, they file a lawsuit, and they file it directly with the Texas Supreme Court. So here's the entire court, 9 members of the court, all Republicans, many, perhaps even most, appointed by Abbott and then subsequently won elections. And Abbott's part of the lawsuit, Governor Abbott. And he says, hey, we got to throw these people, these Democrats, out of office. They broke quorum for a number of weeks. They abandoned their office, and you need to take them off the ballot. Court, the law allows that, and you need to go do it. Well, the court uniformly denied it. Just straight up, no, we're not going to do it, claiming that the Texas House and the legislature had the authority to sanction them more aggressively than they did. By the way, I agree with that. The Texas House could have done a lot more, in my very strong belief. They had some quotes like, in the end, a quorum was restored in a few weeks' time, and intervention by the interplay of political and practical forces, wrote Justice Blaylock, the chief of the court, who, as I recall, worked for Governor Abbott at one point. So they refused to act, just straight up. So what did Vo say when he's thumbing his nose at Abbott and the Republicans and the Texas House? He said, when Greg Abbott threatened to arrest and expel us for denying him a quorum, we told him he should come and take it. He tried. Wow. Vo just straight up wrong, failed. He said, quote, Abbott was wrong, weak, and after all his bluster, he couldn't come and take a damn thing. Close quote. This is Abbott's court denying him. Look, folks, we've talked about the Texas Supreme Court because nobody's paying attention to it. And if we don't, then they do things like this. They allow Democrats to just continue this nonsense. They allowed that mom to take the little boy and to California to sexually transition him a few years ago. The dad got in front of the Texas Supreme Court, and they just let it happen. These are some of the distractions that I've talked about. We're distracted from our bread and butter and ensuring that the Republicans don't grow the budget, which they did last time by $20 billion or something. Ensure Republicans give us property tax cuts. But we get distracted because we come to find out that we have to go and force the legislature to pass laws that, for example, protect children from sexual transitions. Like, holy smokes, protect children from parents taking them or adults taking them out of state to transition them. That kid was like 5, 6 years old. It was so tragic and heartbreaking. The court failed us there. They failed us on these Democrats. It's the same court that came up and said you can't talk about religious values if you've lost a child by a drunk 18-wheeler driver. You say, hey, I can't put a value on the life, this child that I was carrying in my womb, who your drunk driver killed. I can't put any monetary value on that. My faith is so strong. Life is precious, has unlimited value. They said, nope, can't use the word values. Religious values, family values, community values shall not enter. Like, this is craziness. And nobody's really paying attention. And it's the same cabal funding them who are funding against our conservatives, who are funding the Democrats, and we're having to go and fight for things that should be pro forma. If a Democrat flees the state of Texas to avoid their duty when they're in office, they should be removed from office, period. Full stop. There's no question. If conservatives, if mega donors who just happen to be gubernatorial donors and donors to these, no doubt donors to these justices as well, if they're going to fund Democrats and they're going to fund against all these conservative Republicans, then we have to do something about it. And if we have to shake the ground to get Governor Abbott's attention to do something about it, then so be it. And I believe very strongly we'll have a United States Senator in Ken Paxton who is not afraid of that fight. And Mitch Little, state representative, and Katrina Pearson, state representative, and DeRazio and LaHood and Hopper and Money and these others who are so strong. They are not afraid of these fights. If we have to take it to them, folks, we will. This is Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs, and we have a big dog with us today, a freedom fighter for liberty, a Texan activist, and I'm so excited. We have Destin Sandusky. Introduce yourself and tell us about yourself, please.
Yeah, Anthony, thank you for having me on. I'm Destin Sandusky, Executive Director of Texans for Fiscal Responsibility, and the new project that we've launched last year, Texas Anti-Predatory Gambling Alliance. It's kind of a mouthful. We call it TAPGA for short. So TFR and TAPGA. TAPGA is kind of my domain for the time being.
And I think I mispronounced your last name, as I have done many times before as I introduced you. I'm so sorry. Well, folks, we have a freedom fighter, and you guys are doing so much. I mean, your reach, your organizations and the ecosystem's reach is in excess of 1 million activists a day, as I understand it. You and I could talk for hours and hours, but let me try to narrow our discussion here. So my understanding is,
sure.
You in particular and the organizations, and I want to get into the Texas Anti-Predatory Alliance efforts because I'm shocked that we need them. But let's talk about the 3 priorities that you guys are trying to advance with RPT and the convention coming up. Is that fair? Can we do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Anthony, thank you. The RPT convention's coming up. We're a nonprofit organization that wears a lot of different hats, but we do have a C4 outfit and do a lot of advocacy there. And one of the things that we're advocating for ahead of the Republican Party of Texas convention is just 3 things that are a part of our big slate of legislative priorities that we would like to see the Republican Party of Texas make their legislative priorities as well. So I'm really fortunate to have been tapped to be on that committee, the Legislative Priorities Committee. And we're pushing to eliminate property taxes, prioritizing the M&O school portion, which we think would set a great precedent for the state of Texas to put us on a path to eliminating all property taxes. That's, half or more of most people's property tax bill. And then the second one, which really is kind of the preeminent fight that the property tax fight flows out of, and that's the fight to ban taxpayer-funded lobbying. You've talked about this on your show previously. I think the grassroots over the last several years have really come to know what this means. It's basically the whining and dining of lawmakers using our money against us, which is just unethical. It's gross. It needs to stop. We came really close to banning the practice last session and during the specials over the summer. But this time I think we're going to see it through. It's just going to be a matter of, are there going to be a bunch of loopholes and carve-outs and things like that? We're advocating for a full ban of the practice from top to bottom. And then the last one, and to your point, is kind of the one that I think people are scratching their head about, because this wasn't really something on our radar 5, 6, 7, even 10 years ago, right? But that's abolishing the Texas lottery and then preventing the state from expanding other forms of predatory gambling.
So this is what floored me, and you're right. On this show, we've covered eliminating property taxes. Now, you guys are focusing on M&O. I also want to back up for all of our listeners. I believe that stands for maintenance and operations, correct? So,
that's right, yeah. So this is kind of the general overhead of what the schools are doing, funding salaries and things like that.
Thank you. And then of course, banning taxpayer-funded lobbying, and here at politicswiththebigdogs.com, you can sign a petition, and we'll send it directly to your state legislator advocating for this ban. It's just shocking. You nailed it. They're taking our local tax dollars. They're paying Austin lobbyists to wine and dine legislators so that the locals can tax us more and pay the lobbyists more. And the last few years, it's been $250 million of taxpayer dollars that have flowed in the lobby. And now you guys are fighting a fight that none of us would have expected you had to fight. And thank you for doing it.
Yeah.
Banning predatory gambling. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So, TFR has been around since 2007, and we were kind of born out of the fight about the franchise tax, and lots of other, tax fights along the way. But last year, there was a new threat to taxpayers, and families in Texas, that we saw become kind of unhinged. And there was a major scandal that erupted in February of last year covering a rigged lottery jackpot from 2023, so a few years prior. That, and then the combination of the hundreds of millions of dollars pouring into the state by casino proponents of bringing casinos to Texas really spurred us on. We didn't see anybody really in the space standing up for taxpayers and families in Texas on this fight. And so we introduced a project of TFR TAPCA to push back and do something about it.
And folks, let's make sure that we're getting definitions. So predatory gambling, and I'm going to try to outline it, and you just correct me. You're not going to hurt my feelings. You correct me on the air. As I understand it, it's being defined as a combination of government and corporate hand in hand. So the lotto, for example, would be predatory gambling, correct?
That's right. Yeah. A good thing to help us understand what predatory gambling is to kind of go through what it's not. So, I like to tell people I went to LSU. Our president, Andrew McVeigh, he went to Texas A&M. If we have a $20 wager, about whether or not the Aggies are going to go to Death Valley and beat them on the football field, that's not predatory gambling, right? Betting $1 a hole with your buddies on the golf course is not predatory gambling. March Madness brackets, fantasy football. These are forms of what we would call social gambling, right? This is gambling for entertainment purposes only. But then when you have somebody who is entering into the picture with the participants, who has a vested interest in the playing of the games and is taking either a cut, or a percentage, or is, benefiting from the level of participation by the players, that's where you have this predatory thing. And the thing that's interesting about it, Anthony, is predatory gambling only exists when you have a corporate interest that's partnered with government because it's so highly regulated, right? So in the state of Texas, for example, we don't have any form of predatory gambling except the lottery. And the lottery is basically the government monopoly of predatory gambling in the state of Texas. So nobody else is allowed to play except government. And what we know about predatory gambling is that it preys on the most vulnerable people in our communities. And this sets up kind of like this fundamental, irreconcilable arrangement where government which is supposed to exist to protect our rights, or as Paul says in the book of Romans, government is for our good. I'm an LSU guy. I like a nice, simple definition. That's a good one for me, right? Government is for our good. Well, if government's for our good, it can't hold that in one hand and then actually prey upon people in the other at the same time. That's the irreconcilable relationship that exists. So government operating as a predatory gambling agent is just bad. It's bad for taxpayers. It's bad for families. And none of the promises that are ever made in order to establish new forms of predatory gambling ever come to fruition. For example, the Texas lottery came about in 92, 93, out of the economic downturn of the time, with the promise of making a lot more money. And it was sold to voters as a way to fundamentally transform public education spending in Texas. Well, here we are more than 30 years later, and the Texas lottery funds, I'm not kidding, 3 calendar days of school. That's it. That's not exactly fundamental transformation of our public education system. So,
and folks,
a lot of people are scratching their heads.
I'm dating myself here, but I was actually working in the legislature when that bill moved through. I was in UT in undergrad here in Austin, or up in Austin rather, and working for a Republican member. There were very few Republican members at the time, and that's how it was sold. This is going to be dedicated revenue to the public schools in large part so your home property taxes won't grow. And Texans went out there and they passed it, and we had a constitutional amendment, and then we got hoodwinked by government. They put it in the general fund, or effectively in the general fund, and your point is well taken. So now we have efforts, primarily the Sands casinos, Chinese casino, who they have pumped tens of millions of dollars into Texas for political efforts. And these are my words, not you. And of course, if you're just joining us, this is Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs. We have Destin Sensky, who is executive director of Texans for Fiscal Responsibility, on with us. And he's talking about many of the things that we've been talking about: eliminating property taxes, banning taxpayer-funded lobbying. But what we haven't been talking about, and clearly need to be talking about, is their Texas Anti-Predatory Gambling Alliance. And it's shocking that we need this. But we've had the Sands casinos, who used to own the Venetian, but now I guess they've sold all their domestic casinos. They own Chinese casinos in Macau. They've been pumping millions and millions of dollars and into Republican primaries against conservatives like Andy Hopper and LaHood and DeRazio. Folks, really strong social conservatives, value conservatives, free market libertarians who have the courage to stand up and defend us for many of the issues that you and I hold dear, you and I being the audience. And instead, the folks at Texans for Lawsuit Reform, that gazillion-dollar PAC, and the Sands Casino folks have been pumping millions of dollars into efforts to take out conservatives so that they can have these mega casinos. My understanding, and historically, Dan Patrick in the Senate, it's been a hard no, but you never know how that works. A whole bunch of new senators have come in. The House passed it once already, some sessions ago, and my observation is Governor Abbott was, some years ago kind of passively for it, and then I think there was a grassroots activity, or then he said, I don't know that we ought to be doing that, and now it's a who knows. But there's a lot of money being sloshed around, and I didn't ever imagine that we, activist conservatives, would be sitting here having to say we have to defend our communities and our children against predatory gambling in these mega casinos. So thank you, Destin, for what you guys are doing. Tell us more.
Yeah. So what we saw over, this started in like 2022 and 2023, was the formation of several PACs and then the flowing of money into the lobby in support of growing, the vote count towards bringing, expanded forms of gambling to Texas, whether that be online sports betting or the new brick and mortar casino concepts that everybody's been talking about. And then, they really turned the temperature up. And so, by their own admission, they're spending about $100 million a year on this effort to bring casinos to Texas.
Whoa, stop. The Venetian folks are spending $100 million a year in Texas?
That's right. Yeah, so what we've heard is they're kind of braggadociously saying, hey, look, this is how much we're going to spend. Buckle up, get on board, or else. And they've done some PR campaigns, to try to sell people on things like jobs and the money it's going to fix our schools, or maybe even that we could fix our property tax situation with this money, right? They're trying to build up support among the public and then especially among lawmakers in Austin in order to persuade them that this is a real winner for taxpayers and families.
Okay, I'm
nothing could be
you.
further from the truth.
Folks,
yeah.
Destin, tell them where they can sign up with your organization.
Yeah, sure. So we're at texastaxpayers.com. And then our new project has its own website. You can get some information about predatory gambling and our work on this issue in particular. That's just tapga.org, TAPGA.org, tapga.org. So we've got some articles up that talk about all the various different forms of predatory gambling, whether that's the Texas lottery scandal. Lots of news on that recently here up on the website. Online sports betting, whether it's this major controversy we're seeing with the superstar quarterback that just transferred to Texas Tech and his violation of NCAA rules on betting on his own teams and such, or this casino effort. So I'll give you one example, Anthony. Back in December, we had a ongoing special election for SD9. It's a DFW area Senate seat. And this one entity, or several entities funded by the Las Vegas Sands Corp, spent $3.5 million in support of one candidate who was pro-gambling, or at least was telling people that he, quote unquote, would leave it to the voters. And this is just language that we see a lot of pro-gambling lawmakers taking now, where basically they say, oh, well, my position on it isn't actually all that important. We just need to let the voters decide. But here's the thing, is if you have an entity that's willing to spend $100 million a year on efforts to move the needle on the issue, how much money would we expect them to spend on a referendum, a constitutional amendment election? I mean, in order to just get to 50% plus one vote. It could be, $500 million. We know from some of the economic studies that have been done that a large brick and mortar casino would bring in about $1 billion in revenue a year. We also know that the one that the Las Vegas Sands Corp in particular has talked about bringing to the DFW Metroplex could be as large as 2.5 times that size. So this is an unbelievable amount of money. Yeah. And I think with, the ROI and the math involved on the business model, we should expect to have this fight over the next 6, 8, 10, 12 years, right? If we don't stand up and do something about it now.
And, folks, and we need to stand up. And you've got to stand up. I just didn't understand it was this big of a threat. So it's TexasTaxpayers, plural.com, or T as in Tango, A as in Alpha, P as in Paul, G as in George, A as in Alpha.org. Because, look, I don't want predatory gambling in my homes and in my communities in my state. I just don't think we need it, fundamentally. Other Republicans might disagree. But here's what I think we're all in alignment on. These guys have teamed up with Texans for Lawsuit Reform in many instances, and they're trying to take out the most conservative members. DeRazios, LaHood, Hopper. There's 10 or 12 Republican Texas House members who will stand up to power and against bad policy, guys. And these are the folks being targeted by the casinos. $100 million is incredibly troubling to me. And you're talking about ROI. Look, that ROI is on the backs of Texans. There's no way around it. So if they think they're going to make $1 billion or $2 billion a year, it's a taking. That's what the lottery is. And my opposition to the lotteries comes from a different cause. I think it's the poorest people who participate. Now, they willingly go and give their money, but it troubles me. It's basically a tax on the poor because wealthier, more educated people tend to understand that you just don't win it. It's this anomaly, and the odds aren't favorable. You're right. There was a weird event, and my understanding is it's come into criminal charges. But we as a movement have to ensure that the Republican Party of Texas opposes this. And if these guys are spending this kind of money out there, then they're going to spend money infiltrating the Republican Party and try to ensure that we don't put as a legislative priority ban. So I'm with you, and I'm glad and thank you for being on the Legislative Priorities Committee. We got a number one, as a movement, as a party, vote and support to eliminate property taxes. Number two, as a movement and a party, vote and support to ban taxpayer funding, lobbying, and now I understand the magnitude of the harm. Thank you. We also have to vote and support ending and ensuring that we do not permit predatory gambling in the state of Texas. Is that appropriately
Anthony,
said?
to put a bow on it, right? The reason that we ought to abolish the lottery, right, is not because it failed on the promises only, right? That it hasn't fundamentally transformed our education spending or the way we fund our schools in Texas, but because it's got a long 3 decades scandal-filled history of corruption. We've got this rigged jackpot where basically the allegations are that there was a international crime syndicate operating with cooperation from the Texas Lottery Commission and its members. And so we have kind of 3-pronged reason. Number one is, to your point, this is a moral abomination. Government is preying on, marketing to an addictive product to our most vulnerable and economic downtrodden Texans, the people that we should be extending a hand to help, and not necessarily to kick them while they're down, so to speak, which is what the Texas Lottery does. The second argument is ethical. The violations that they've done of, obviously alleged criminality here, working with international crime syndicate to rig these jackpots, take advantage of well-intended, well-meaning people playing a game that they think is being objectively run by the government. And that's been violated. We deserve accountability, and we deserve, taxpayers and families deserve for justice to be served in that. And then the third element, to put a big bow on it, right? Right now, with all of this money flowing into Texas to try to expand predatory gambling in Texas, to change our constitution and accommodate these corporate interests and allow them to partner with government, first we should consider the Texas Lottery, right? This form of predatory gambling we allow has been such a massive scandal-filled failure. Why on earth would we ever consider expanding into other forms of predatory gambling where we know things like money laundering, human trafficking, drugs, narcotics, other forms of criminal behavior are attracted to these? So let's clean up house, deal with the one form that's failed us over the last 30 years, eliminate it, abolish it, return the appropriations process back to our lawmakers, and then prevent any form of expanded gambling to come as well. I think by sending a signal that we're going to abolish the one form of predatory gambling we allow in Texas, we can communicate really strongly that now is not the best time to have a conversation about expanding.
And look, folks, to legalize this, it would have to go to a vote to the people. So Republicans who really want to support casino gambling and expansion and accept these millions of dollars, they all say the same thing. They say, we're going to leave it to the vote of the people and let them decide. And I know that that's nonsense, listeners, that it is folks who just don't have the Constitution to stay the course and say, hey, we're happy with Texas as it is. We're happy that our families are here. And in fact, part of this goes to the conversation we've been having, Destin, outside of today, the listeners and I, on this show. Texas really moving toward big business. If you're a $1 billion big business, we're going to put your interests ahead of the Texans. And I think that's generally happened as a big, broad statement across Texans. But it's more and more happening to Republican activists as well. Yeah, you're going to fail. I know you think that's wrong. You don't like it, and it is wrong, but big business wants it, therefore we're going to do it. We're going to strip you of your right to elect your judges. We're going to do some appointments. So it's big businesses get their own judicial system, appointed by the governor. What happens when the governor becomes a Democrat? So more and more folks like Destin and these organizations, tapga.org, have to present themselves because big business is being welcomed with open arms. And the Texas House did pass the effort, as I recall. Am I misremembering that? A couple of sessions ago or 3 sessions ago, maybe?
I'd say just that there's been examples throughout the last decade or so, to your point, Anthony, about big business getting corporate handouts, property tax abatements. They get to live in a world that differs from everyday, ordinary Texans all the time, whether it's the moving picture fund or tax abatements for major developments, or a different judicial system established. There is a movement to disenfranchise people who are already, in a lot of ways, have the deck stacked against them with rising property taxes, record inflation. Things are really hard, especially for younger Americans, right? And so the idea that we would continue to go down that path at their expense is really troubling.
And thank you. I agree with that. My question was actually a little bit different. Am I misremembering? I thought the Texas House passed effectively an opportunity to bring gambling to Texas a couple sessions ago. Am I misremembering?
Yeah, they did. There was a vote maybe 4 years ago, 2 sessions ago. There was not a vote in the most previous regular session, but it did. It was only in the House, and that failed.
Oh, that vote, it failed in the House on the floor. Okay, good. So then the casinos came in. They've committed $100 million or more. They've been spending it. They've been actively trying to take people out. House members, they've been scaring them. They've been supporting moderates in primaries and Democrats, spending $3.5 million in one Senate seat. So, folks, we have to come together. Tell us what we can do to support you and the organization, and tell us what we can do to ensure that this makes it as a priority by the Republican Party of Texas so these legislators don't do it again.
Yeah, so the first thing is, one, if these issues are something that's important to you, I know the Republican Party of Texas convention can be far, it can be costly to be there, but it is such an important part of our process, our lawmaking process. So if you can make it there, especially Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday while committees are meeting, come and testify. Let the members of the committees know how important these issues are to you. And then if you're a delegate and you plan on being there for the kind of Thursday, Friday, Saturday portion of convention, the convention proper, if you will, at some point, a package of legislative priorities will come to the floor, and you'll vote on the top 8 that you would like to see the RPT and its infrastructure and the people and the mechanisms behind it go into the building and advocate for. And so, eliminating the M&O school portion of our property taxes and putting us on a path to eliminating all property taxes, banning taxpayer-funded lobbying, and abolishing the Texas lottery and preventing us from expanding into other forms of predatory gambling. All things I would ask for your vote for. But for other than that, if you are not already a subscriber, go to texastaxpayers.com, sign up. We send 2 emails a week. We're not a big, bunch of spammers. We're not going to blow you up. We give you one informational piece and then a newsletter with some of the top news of the week. And then we'll give you a few call to actions when the need arises. But Anthony, other than that, we're just really grateful to be on the show and take our message to folks. I think the people are with us on these. It's just a matter of whether or not lawmakers will join us in the fight.
Thank you. And if you're joining late, this is Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs, and we have Destin Sensky, who his name is always a struggle for me to pronounce. I apologize. Fighting the good fight. And let's not leave without recognizing again that TFR, Texans for Fiscal Responsibility, really came out of a Republican-led effort to do a franchise tax. I mean, it's just shocking. And I was working in government at the time, and I don't remember if I had been working for Rick Perry, Governor Rick Perry at the time or not, but Governor Perry helped lead this. And I'm going to summarize it, folks. What I remember being and I loved Governor Perry. He's really deviated from me of late, but at the time I loved it. And what I recall about that tax was you could be a business in operation, never make a profit, but owe a whole bunch of tax because you had gross revenue of $2 million. But if it cost you $2.2 in expenses to make the 2, then you had a loss of $200,000, obviously. But the state of Texas was going to tax you on your gross revenue, not your profit. So folks like you and your organization and TFR and the activists whose shoulders we stand on really fought the fight early, and we need you, and we thank you for it. We thank you for it, sir. So let's do this, folks. We only have 8 priorities that RPT is going to embed. Destin is advancing these 3. They are very worthy in from my recollection or from my opinion. And I do want to at least give a wave. I don't remember what the number is, but the Texas legislature, and this includes the House, who I've often been critical of, they passed like 39 or 59 or some really impressive number of priorities, of party priorities. So I do want to give them a shout out because it hasn't always been the case. You know, we've been moving them through the Senate with some frequency and they've died in the House, but I appreciate the House for that, but we got to prioritize this hard stuff now, banning taxpayer-funded lobbying, making sure we don't have predatory gambling, and you know, Abbott's going to move this property taxes. He's going to have to show his mettle on it because, by God, we need it. We had a massive surplus. They didn't touch our property taxes in any meaningful fashion. So, Destin, did I leave anything off?
Yeah, I would just remind people that you know, the reason that the Legislative Priorities Committee and these legislative priorities that the RPT is going to advance out of convention are only important because of the success that we've had pushing them over the last several sessions, right? I think the grassroots have really organized in a way that I don't remember from 10 years ago when I first got involved. We've kind of matured as a movement. I think we know how to get things done in the building and apply pressure. And so that's why the priorities are so important. And you see so many great issues and so many great organizations advocating for theirs to be included, right? It means something to be a legislative priority of the Republican Party of Texas now because we've got more than a snowball's chance maybe than we did, you know, 5, 6, 8 years ago, right? So now the idea that we can get some of these major policy wins across the finish line is huge. It's encouraging. I just am so grateful for so many people that mostly on a volunteer basis sacrifice so much to be a part of the process, whether it's going to Houston for convention, driving long hours to Austin to testify, sometimes late into the evening, right? These are all important things. We've got the best activists in the country. We set the standard for policy in the whole country right here in Texas. And I think we're doing as good a job as we've ever done, thanks to the grassroots.
And folks, this is a radio show, so you can't see my face. Therefore, I'm going to lead with, I say this tongue in cheek, but I mean it. It's underlying foundation. If it's a fight between the casinos and TFR and the listeners of this show, the activists, I know who I'm betting on. Thank you so much for coming on.
We've got the truth on our side.
Always. I put my money on us. All right, my friend. Thank you, sir, for coming on. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Anthony, for having me.
This is Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs. Thank you so much for fighting for liberty. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's go forth and conquer. Conservative values will overcome. God bless you, and God bless Texas.
Politics with the Big Dogs with Anthony Holm is supported in part by the First Amendment Alliance Education Fund. From deep in the heart of Texas, you've been listening to Politics with the Big Dogs.